Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Welcome to our 42nd installment of the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Matos, towards the end of the book of Bamidbar, beginning of chapter 30. Chapter 30, verse 2, it says, Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, saying, this is the thing that Hashem has commanded. If a man takes a vow to Hashem or swears an oath to establish a prohibition upon himself, shall not desecrate his word. According to whatever comes from his mouth, shall he do. But if a woman will take a vow to Hashem or establish a prohibition in her father's home, in her youth, and her father heard of the vow or prohibition that she established upon herself, and her father was silent about her, all her vows will stand. Any prohibition she established upon herself shall stand. So here, the beginning of the parsha. Now it's interesting. It says Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes. Right? It doesn't say God spoke to Moshe and he spoke to the rest of the Jewish people. We'll see why in a second. And he talks about making vows, the importance of making vows or swearing and taking an oath and establishing a prohibition upon himself. He shall not desecrate his word. So it's quite a lot to speak about Nadarim or about vows, which we'll see. Says Mori Varebi Ravagon Moshe Stormach Shlita, he should be well. First question he asks is, as we mentioned, that all the parts of the Torah are really given by Moshe. Right? By the Ber Shema Moshe Lemo, the Ber B'nai Israel. God spoke to Moshe and he said, speak to the Jewish people, saying this, don't do this, do that, keep this, stay away from that, whatever the case is. Here, he speaks to the heads of the tribes. Right? Right? He speaks to the heads of the tribes. So here, it's interesting that he speaks to them, and it's not given over like the other verses of the Torah that say God spoke to Moshe, and Moshe gave it over. Here, this parsha is given over to the heads of the tribe. The only other parsha that's given over like that, when it says over here, say this thing that God commanded. What's the only other thing? It's called shchutei chutz, that if a sacrificed or a Kohen sacrificed outside of where he should have been, right? If he didn't sacrifice in the temple or in a certain area where he wasn't allowed to. So it also uses this language. So here, the important thing to know is the importance of speech. Because a person, as Rabbi here points out, a person can forbid something upon himself if he doesn't go back on his word. Meaning, a person could make a vow and forbid something to himself. And therefore, by doing so, if he doesn't take it back, or he doesn't say bli neder without a vow, so he forbids something to himself. He makes a vow, and he can't go back on this vow. There is a way to get out of it. A person go in front of three people, three kosher Jews, or really go in front of a Beis Din, surely go in front of a rabbinical court for the fact that they know these things better than three kosher Jews, which is probably true. So then they'll say to you, well, had you known, you would have, this would have happened, or this would have occurred when you made this vow, would you have made the vow? And the person says, oh no, I never would have made the vow I never would have made such a vow. Then they'll permit the vow. So there are ways to permit a vow. But my Rebbe here points out how careful a person has to be when they speak. So, there's quite a bit to speak about that. That idea that even though in general terms a person doesn't necessarily use the language like the Torah would say in order to make a vow. Right? The Talmud says when a person makes a vow, it's as if he's sanctifying something to the temple. They'll say, a person will say, Hare alai, this thing should be, forbidden to me, like, bringing a sacrifice to the temple, like this, that, or, the other thing, whatever it is that they want to forbid on themselves. Now you say, well, a little bit archaic. Torah doesn't, even though that's what, the Talmud says, people don't speak that way. I don't know too many people who, when they make a vow, or they say something in the language of making a vow, as they say that they're consecrating it to the, to the temple, like a sacrifice or something like that. That's just, not the way people speak. So Talmud there says that we have to go after how people speak. So that would mean that if a person says something, and this we have to be careful of, and most people probably aren't so careful, but it may actually change, the way you think, or the way you speak. Point is, a person may say that they're going to do X. Now what happens if they don't do X? Do we say that what they said is null and void? Or if they don't do it, they've now transgressed of not doing what they said they were going to do. They didn't keep their word. But you say, well, if a person says, they're going to do X, whatever, they're going to go shopping, they're going to go to the store, they're going to get money, they're going to, whatever the case is, if they would say such a thing, that may have the status of a vow. Regardless of whether you say it's you're comparing it to a sacrifice, and it's like you consecrate it in the temple, right? Even if you don't say it like that, it's like a person's taking on a vow. So, each case has to be, looked at, and seen, is it a vow? It's not a vow, or an oath, so to speak. So we certainly have to be careful, because if a person says they're going to do something, they don't do it, and they don't say bli neder without a vow, like I'm going to go to the store, bli neder. Otherwise, what's the problem? You don't go to the store. So according to that, it could be like you made a vow. You tell me it doesn't really sound like a vow. You're right. Maybe it doesn't. But a person said they're going to do something. And if they don't take it back, then they should do what they said they're going to do. So here's my Rebbe here points out. You got to be careful what you say. Now what would happen if someone says, okay, today, for all you men out there, today you say it's not Shabbos or a festival, you say today I'm going to put on tefillin. Right, I'm going to put on these black boxes, these phylacteries or whatever. I don't even know what phylacteries are, but whatever phylacteries are, right? You put on these, these boxes on your arm, right? You put it over here on your arm and you wrap it around. If you're right-handed, put them between your, frontlets between your eyes, right here, right, etc. So a person says they're going to put on tefillin today. So it's an obvious question. Right? If there's an obligation to put on tefillin today, then how can I make a vow on something that I'm already obligated to do? Right? So let's repeat that. I'm obligated to put on tefillin. Right? All you men out there. Right? Today's a regular day. Right? Not Shabbos, not a festival. So there's an obligation to put on tefillin. So you say, I'm going to put on tefillin today. And you don't say bli neder. You don't say without a vow. What, I just made a vow? I'm obligated to do it. Today I'm going to keep Shabbos. If today is Shabbos. Right? Let's make that clear. Today, if today's Shabbos, you say, okay, I'm going to keep Shabbos today. I'm going to keep all the laws of Shabbos. Well, duh, you already have to keep it. There's already an obligation. There's already an obligation to keep Shabbos, and what are you telling me? So the answer is, when a person says such a thing, right, since we're already obligated to do it, it can't be he's saying it in order to obligate him more. Right? There's no extra obligation. I'm really excited to put on tefillin. That's really what he means. In other words, since you already have an obligation to do it, if a person says that they're going to put on tefillin, it means it's as if to say they're psyching themselves up. They're psyching themselves up to do the mitzvah. Otherwise, you already have an obligation to do the mitzvah. Right? If you already have an obligation to do the mitzvah, that's it. I can't, what am I going to do? Be more obligated? I'm going to be more obligated. Right? You're already obligated. So the answer is that if a person says such a thing, right, then they're only doing it because they're psyching themselves up for the mitzvah. They want to do the mitzvah in a better way. A person says, I'm going to go learn Torah now. Or you're already obligated to learn Torah. Right? But, again, a person, if they have to do other things, they work or whatever, so, they don't have an obligation to learn when they work because, they're busy, trying to bring money home, put money on the table. So if a person's working, you're exempt from learning Torah. If you're not working, you should be learning Torah, unless there are other extenuating circumstances why you're not doing that. But that's probably a bad example. If a person said, I'm going to go learn, and they don't go learn, right? That could be taken as a vow. It's not the same obligation per se as to say, I'm going to put on tefillin. You already have an obligation to put on tefillin. At this point, when it comes to learning, maybe you have an obligation right now, maybe you don't. So the point Rabbi here says is we have to be careful. We have to be careful what we say. Not only that, there's a question that the Talmud asks, what's better? Is it better to make a vow and uphold it? Or is it better never to make a vow? Right? So let's break this down. If a person makes a vow and he upholds it, it should be a tremendous thing. Right? He forbids something to himself, or he does something, he says, I'm going to do this, and it ends up, it's like he's making a vow. So maybe that's a good thing. Right? He upholds what he said he's going to do. And therefore, since he upholds it, it's like a mitzvah. The other side says no. The other side says, even a person makes a vow and upholds it, he's called a sinner. Why? We don't go around making vows. We don't go around forbidding things to ourselves by saying, I'm going to forbid this to myself in the form of a vow because God wants us to enjoy this world. He does not want us to separate from things in this world. He taught us and teaches us what is good for us, what's not good for us. So even if he upheld the vow, it's not considered good. The reason it's not considered good is because, A, we don't go around separating ourselves from something, even if we want to raise ourselves to a higher level. Right? Simple explanation is because God gave us these things to use. So if it's permissible to use, why am I forbidding it to myself? Say, I want to reach a higher aesthetical level. Right? So the answer is that a person can do certain things without making vows. You want to reach the high spiritual level, that's a good idea, but you don't necessarily go around, forbidding things upon yourself that are permissible. Now, that's one answer. A second answer, or a second possible answer, is that when a person makes a vow, well, what are we worried about? If a person ends up making a vow, we're worried about the fact that he's not going to keep it. Because there could be a million things that could happen, and a person gets sidetracked, he forgot, or whatever the case is. So, if he gets sidetracked, he doesn't uphold his end of the bargain. He said he was going to do something, didn't do it, didn't follow through. So if a person makes a vow, so we are seriously worried you're not going to carry it out. So you say, well, I'm not going to be like that. I'll carry it out. Well, we don't care about what you would do or what you think you would do. We're going according to the majority of people. And the majority of people could certainly get sidetracked. Very easy. This day and age, to get sidetracked by any number of things. And the person forgets. So, I made a vow. I completely forgot. Yeah, thank you very much. So now you got to try and get yourself out of it. If possible. But that's what we're concerned about. We're concerned he may forget. And if he forgets, it's a tremendous problem. Right? Imagine if you use the language, like you're sacrificing something simply, then I'm going to bring this, I'm going to consecrate this thing to the temple. But you didn't do it. Right? So we'd agree, probably, that's pretty bad. That's not a good habit, that we want to get into. So, speech, and again, we're not even going to get into about proper and non-proper speech, right? Speaking against others, lashon hara, other things, right? That we're not even going to discuss, right? That's all we're talking about here. We're talking about when a person says they're going to do something, whether they use the language of a vow or they forbid something upon themselves. So here, we have to be tremendously careful. Because if a person says something and it sounds like a vow, even if it's not normal, the language that you use to make a vow, right? Like in the time of the temple. Nonetheless, if it accomplishes the same thing, then that would be forbidden. And that we have to be very, very, very careful, about. Because even if we want to raise ourselves to a higher spiritual level, so we have to be very, very careful what we say. Because if you say you're going to do something, you don't do it, that could be underneath this category of not following through. And then if it's like a vow, now you're stuck. Right? You have to go to rabbinical court and get it uprooted. Right? There are ways, as we mentioned, there are ways to uproot it. One of the ways is the person has regret for what they did. Like the rabbis will try and find you an opening, and say, had you known this would have done this, that, and the other thing, would you have done it? And say, oh no, I never would have done it. Right? They have to find an opening in order for you to have, to show regret, to show remorse, and that really knocks it out. But, it's pretty serious. We don't go around saying whatever we want. Right? The Torah seems pretty clear. We don't go around, saying God's name in vain. It's one of the 10 Commandments. Right? Don't take God's name in vain. That means a person makes a blessing. He's not sure if he made the right blessing or not. Right? So we say Safek brachos lahakil. If I have a doubt, right? If I have a doubt whether I made the right blessing or not, we're lenient. Say, no, but I really want to fix it up. But you're not sure. You have a major, major doubt over here. Did I make the blessing? Did I make the blessing? If I did make the blessing, did I make the right one? You're not sure. Right? You could obligate yourself in a certain way. By eating something else. Let's say that was the case. You ate something, you're not sure you made a blessing. So you want to obligate yourself in the same category. You could do that. Right? If it's the same food category and you never had intention when you ate the thing before that you're going to eat this thing now. So yeah, you could have that in mind. That would work. You want to be careful because it doesn't always work. It might be considered a blessing I didn't need to make. So we don't go around saying God's name for no reason. So therefore you say, but I really want to fix it up. Yeah, so the Talmud tells you the best way to fix it up is don't do anything. Because we're going to be lenient, and B, the reason we're lenient is because you are not going to go around saying God's name for no reason. I want to fix it up. Who cares you want to fix it up? Right? You blew it. Since you blew it, there's nothing to do. In this case, we're lenient. There will be times, maybe it's a Torah prohibition or a Torah question, so that we'd be more stringent on. But making blessings is rabbinical. So if it's something rabbinical and I have a doubt, I can be lenient. Not in all cases, you have to see what the case is, but in general, that is the case. So all the more so, we have to be careful of what we say, because what we say may constitute a vow. Even if we don't talk in a normal way of making a vow, these things that we say in general could certainly be problematic. So let's go to the first question. So the first question was, how could it be the Torah here says God spoke to the heads of the tribes? What do you mean the heads of the tribes? Why didn't he speak to Moshe? Why didn't he speak to Moshe, say, and have Moshe give over the Jewish people like this, that, and the other thing, like in mostly every other case? So, when God spoke to Moshe, some Rebbe points out, when God spoke to Moshe, he did it in a way where he explained what God said. God told him something, he explained it to the Jewish people. Right? He just did it in a shortened way. Could be God gave him all these explanations or whatever, and he said it out in the shortened version. right? Either people would understand, or be too difficult, or whatever the case is. He gave it over in a shortened way, and people were able to understand what God had spoken to them. So, in this case, what happens is God explains it to Moshe, and then Moshe gives it over. So Moshe gives it over according to the way the people can handle it, the way the people are going to understand it. So that he could have gone into great detail, right? He could have gone into great detail and explain it, so they would understand. So my Rebbe here says, so that's the difference between this parsha, in these laws, the laws of making vows, and everything else in the Torah. Why? Because here it's not explained to the Jewish people through Moshe, through the way Moshe felt, the people could understand it, in greater detail, or however he needed to explain it so they would understand it. But here the heads of the tribes were given this command, and they gave it over in a shortened way, in order to explain the Jewish people according to what they needed in a shortened way. In other words, however they understood it, they gave it over, right? But they didn't give it over in this long, drawn-out way like Moshe did in many ways, for a number of things. So here they gave it over in a much shorter way, much, shortened version. So in these parshas, the point is, so why by Nadarim? Why by making vows? Why is making vows any different? Why would we have thought that making vows is any different? Because the essence and the importance of speech certainly guards the Jewish people and can put them in danger. Right? How they speak can put them in danger. So, the Torah wants to teach over here that a person, if he's explaining something, should try and explain it the quickest way possible, until the person, hopefully the person understands it. Why? Because if you have to keep adding stuff and explaining it, whatever, so you may have an issue of understanding, right? The person who it's being explained to may not understand it properly, and therefore you have this long-winded thing and get a whole philosophical discussion, who knows what. So here it's better to give it over in a shortened way so it's clear. But, one thing is for sure, and that is that it shows the importance of speech, and the importance of how we speak, one to another. Now again, that doesn't mean, a person speaks nice or doesn't speak nice or whatever. It's about clarity, right? Clarity is also important. A person gives over information. Right now, here you're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. You're talking about the heads of the tribes. You're talking about unbelievably great, people that we can't even imagine. Moshe being the greatest of all prophets. All prophecy goes through him. How do we know he's the true prophet? Because God said so. So he can't contradict his prophecy, and his prophecy is greater than everyone else. So, if Moshe's given over prophecy, and God tells him something, a prophet has to give it over right. In other words, if God came to a prophet in a dream, the prophet had to figure out the dream and had to give over the message. If he doesn't give over the message properly, or he makes a mistake, he's liable for a death penalty, which we'll agree, is bad. But the importance of speech over here, right, is not just what I say. If God forbid a person speaks against someone else, the laws of Lashon Hara we're not talking about. We're talking about giving over information. When a person gives over information, as my Rebbe here points out, especially sensitive information from God himself, so they wanted to make sure that they understood. They wanted to make sure that they got it in a way that was clear, that was crisp, that was clear and to the point. Not one of these long drawn out, speeches and how are they going to understand, and this and that. They gave over the information that the people had to know. Now Moshe was different. When God spoke to Moshe, and Moshe gave it over to everybody else, what did he do? He gave it over a way that they could understand. Now that means that, he could have gone into great detail. He could have spent a much longer time giving over the information, but he wanted to make sure people understood the information. They say, well, why didn't he speak in a shorter language? Like in this case. He certainly could have done that. God speaks to him saying, okay, do this. Don't do that. Why go on and explain? Right? Why go into more detail? Maybe going into more detail is worse. Right? Because there's a general rule that the more a person adds on, he's taking away. What is he taking away? He's taking away proper understanding. Because he could be given over the information in a discombobulated way. And because it's done in that way, it's confusing. So they say, well, what about this case? Does this case apply? Does that apply? If the information is not given over crystal clear, right, then, how are they going to understand it? So that's a major difference. Moshe gave it over and explained it. Now, obviously, even though he explained it, whatever we have in the Torah, a lot of things we don't have explanation for. We don't know, how they work. We don't know what it means to sit in a sukkah, right? How big is a sukkah? Does it have walls? Does it have a roof or a roof, depending where you're from, right? Is the roof permanent? Is it not permanent? How big does it have to be? What else do I do on sukkahs? Right? What's this idea of a lulav and an esrog? My lemon on steroids, and myrtle leaves, and and aravos. Right? You got the hadassim are the myrtle leaves, and you got the willows as the aravos. And you shake them together with a lulav. Right? It doesn't say that in the Torah. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't explain. But the one in commentary, that explains. It's called the oral tradition. Oral tradition tells us how big a sukkah has to be. Oral tradition tells us, what we have to do with the lulav, etc. And, things that make it invalid. All these different things. Right, so that was also given at Mount Sinai. Right, this oral tradition. Otherwise, we never understand what to do, but with any of these mitzvahs. So that we've spoken about a number of times. The idea over here is that, Moshe could have not explained it, in the way that he felt the people would understand the best. So he could have made it in a much shorter version. Yeah, he could have. Right, but he doesn't. So that's a major difference. Because over here, they give it over, with less explanation, but shortened to the point, where it should be understood, in order to teach you how important speech is. How we're allowed to speak, and what we're allowed to say, that we don't get into this problem, of making vows. Not only that, we get into the general idea that making vows, and separating ourselves from something that is permissible is also not good. Right? Doesn't really make us that much more righteous. God said you're allowed to do this. Whatever the thing is, now you want to forbid it to yourself. Right? We're not into that. We're not into aesthetics. We're not into, living the monk life and, going, sitting in a cave going, and not speaking or whatever. I mean, there are people that, there are some people that may do that. They'll have what they call a tainus dibur. They won't, for a certain amount of time, they won't say anything. They won't speak. Right? They want to guard their mouth. So, like, for however long, they have a tainus dibur and they won't speak. Right? They'll write things down or whatever, but they won't speak. Because they want to guard themselves more. There is such an idea. I do know people who've done such a thing. They don't do it for like 24 hours. They do it for, a much smaller amount of time. Half an hour, whatever, whatever it is. I know a great rabbi who would, when it came to Shabbos, he only spoke words of Torah. They say, well, aren't you only supposed to speak words of Torah? And not speak words of frivolity or, anything else that's not Torah? Yeah, you should, but you was extra careful on Shabbos. Right? Shabbos is the day, of that we separate from the rest of the world. Everything stops, so to speak, by sundown. Everything's cooked, and we tune into God. Pray, we eat 3 meals, right? We pray, etc. And the focus is on learning Torah. That's what we do. You get more sleep than you normally do. You rest your body so you can be physically stronger in order to serve God better. There is what to be said. But you have to know how to use it. And if we're not careful, it's very, very easy in this case to transgress, because a lot of times we're not careful. A lot of times we'll say things and it really takes on the status of a vow. And again, something that takes on the status of a vow, unless a person said bli neder. They say without a vow, then it doesn't apply. It doesn't hold weight. Right? You don't have to worry about it. But if a person did not say that, if he didn't say that, then you have a much bigger problem. Maybe what he said actually constitutes a vow. You could have an oath as well. That an oath, you forbid something to you. Right? You say that this lulav is going to be forbidden to me. Right? You say in the language of an oath. That means I can't derive benefit now from this lulav unless I go to a beis din and they uproot it. They uproot what I said. So, if we look in the Yom Kippur prayer book, and 5 times during Yom Kippur, when we say Al Chet Shechatanu Lifanecha, right, and we beat our chest, Al Chet, we hit our heart, we say Al Chet, I've sinned in front of you, right? A lot of the things that we say are that I've sinned in front of you by things I've spoken. Either I spoke badly against someone, I made vows I shouldn't have. This is important. Speech and what we say can have tremendous ramifications. Even if it's not exactly the same, the same language as, the Talmud uses. Nonetheless, you'll say, well, we're not consecrating anything to the temple. I'm not saying anything like that. That may be true. Right? But when a person says they're going to do something, so the Talmud learns out, that's like saying you're going to bring the sacrifice to the temple, even if you don't use that language. So, we go according to the way people generally speak. And if that's how people speak, then that's when we could have the form of a vow. So it's best if a person is going to say they're going to do something. Right? I'm going to do X. Or I'm going to Y. I'm going to this place or that place or whatever. A person should be careful and they should say bli neder. Right? I'm doing this without a vow, because if I don't do it, maybe consider it a vow. Again, you have to know what's a question or not. If a person, is eating cereal, says, I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to eat the rest of the cereal, says bli neder, right? That may not be a vow. He's already eating. Right? Maybe it's a vow considered, from that time on. Right? It depends. It definitely depends. One thing is for sure, is that I don't think most people are in tune how they speak. You might say, well, if a person curses, they're in tune with that. Or maybe even not, because a person can curse a lot and they don't think there's anything wrong with it. Everybody does it. Right? So that might be a novelty. You tell them, hey, you just cursed. They're like, who cares? That's the way people speak. Right? Well, not everyone curses. Right? At least not every third word. People may, maybe every 10th word, maybe 20th word, whatever. But, you bring that up, people think you're crazy. But it's a higher awareness. It's definitely a higher awareness of how we speak. If people would take stock, before they go to sleep, before their head hits the pillow and they crash and they start snoring. So if you would take stock of what you did during the day, conversations you had, whatever, just by speech alone, a person would be very surprised. I think they'd be very surprised if they analyzed what they said. Forget how they said it, right? Forget how they interact with others. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just, when you're going over your day, what you did or what you accomplished, what you didn't accomplish, you set out to do, you didn't do, whatever, right? So, interaction with people is also crucial. How, what we said, how we interacted with them, etc. But if we think even without that, even if we think about what we did, what we said, we bring back all the conversations. Okay, let's play back the video. All the conversations, that we had with other people, during the day. We may be very surprised, or my language, you may be shocked to what you actually said. They say, a person may say, I don't curse that much. Think about what you said during the day. If you curse 30 times during the day, well, maybe a few, that's average. For a lot of people, it's probably, maybe it's not. And, and you have to see. Because if a person would take stock on what they say, guaranteed, first of all, they'll never thought they said it that much, if they said it at all. And second of all, they're probably not even conscious. They're not even conscious of what they said or what they heard other people say. And subconsciously it does make an imprint, but, if you try and play back the conversations and things that you said, forget actions that you did, right? That you also have to think about. I'm just speaking about speech. So if you thought of all the things you said during the day that had to do with speech, I'll go on a limb here, I think people would be quite shocked of what they said. I've had conversations with people, and, a person makes a comment. I said, really? Did you just say this, that, and the other things? I never said that. Like, you just, unless you're hearing things, or you're going to get your ears checked. This person just made a nasty comment, right? Let's just say for argument's sake. Person makes a nasty comment. You say, why did you just say that? They say what? That you just said X, Y, or Z. I said, no, I didn't. I said, what am I, chopped liver? What do you think, I'm not listening? No, maybe I'm not, but that's what I heard. Did you say that? So they could say, yeah, but I meant something else. Or they could deny it. Right? I had this once, and someone made a pretty derogatory comment. And I said, did you just say this? Did you just say X, Y? Did you just say this? And they denied it. They said, you must be hearing things. I never said that. Now, this person wasn't senile, at least then. Maybe now, but not then. So, I heard clear. Absolutely clear. It wasn't a bad connection. It's clear as day what they said. So they didn't say, no, I didn't mean it. They, get around it. They said, no, I never said it. I'll give another example. Now, many years ago, I made a comment to somebody, and I'll never live this comment down for the rest of my life. And I made a comment, and I said, it feels like this. I didn't say it was this. I said it feels like this. So to this day, the person will turn around and say, but you said this. And this is how the conversation goes. I didn't say that. I said this. That's what I meant, but I didn't say it like that. I said I felt like this. That conversation I've never won. Right? Not about winning or losing conversations, but anytime this conversation comes up, that is what they heard, not what was said. Right? So all the more so, we have to be careful in what we say, and, what our intention is. How many times, while just, speaking about this for a second, how many times has a person sent a text or sent an email and, they looked it over a little bit, but then they hit send. They're like, I can't believe I just sent that. Right? They didn't think. They just, they read it quickly and said, oh, okay, fine, send. And that caused all kinds of problems because they actually said what they didn't want. They might have thought it, but they didn't necessarily want to send it. They could have, rearranged it, said it differently, whatever the case is, but they didn't because because they hit the send button. It's too late. It's already there. Can't erase it. It's already gonzo. So then you have to backtrack. If someone calls you on it, then you have to say, well, I didn't mean it. I sent it, but it's not what I meant. Damage is already done. Right? Damage is already done. So one general warning, you send out an email or a text, read it over carefully before you hit send. Sometimes we think a mile a minute and we do something without thinking. So what does this teach us in general? It teaches us you have to be careful what you say. Well, isn't that obvious? Torah needs to tell me that? Yeah. Right? The Torah doesn't always tell you things that we don't understand. Torah doesn't always tell you things that are incomprehensible. Right? There are many things that don't make a lot of sense in a number of ways. But there are things that do make sense. Right? Speaking properly. Now, in this case, we wouldn't have, before you watch this video, you might not have thought of such a thing. You might not have thought that, if a person says, if I would say I'm going shopping now and they don't go, that might have been a vow. Right? That could have been considered a vow. Probably you didn't think about that. Probably didn't dawn on you that, that type of speech may be forbidden. Well, now you know. Now you know it's a problem. So the Torah doesn't just state the obvious. Right? Don't be a talebearer. That should be obvious. Don't speak badly against others. That should be obvious, even though it's not so obvious. Right? But the Torah tells you what's obvious and what's not necessarily so obvious. Even if it's obvious, there are different things about that might not have been so obvious. One example, Torah says don't speak lashon hara against other people. Don't speak badly against others. That's even if it's true. That's even if everybody knows it. Shocker. People are going to say, it's all over the internet, it's in the newspapers. Let's say it's a proven fact. And everybody knows it. That gives me a right to say it over? How do I know everybody knows it? Well, it's on the internet. Everyone's seen it. Not everyone sees everything. It's in the newspapers. Yeah. Maybe you didn't see it. Maybe someone else, different city, didn't see it. Doesn't know. Whatever the case is. So what have I done? I've just said something that I didn't need to say. Yeah, that is a shocker because most people think, oh, that's not lashon hara. Everybody knows it. I would even say it if he was here. That's also forbidden. And there are only certain conditions the person is allowed to speak against someone else. Very specific conditions. And all the conditions have to be met. So not speaking against someone else has a lot of ramifications that we never would have thought of. Never. Not only that, it's not necessarily something universal that even non-Jews have to be careful of, like in the Noahide laws. Right? Does a non-Jew have to learn about proper speech? No. Right? According to many rabbinical authorities, they don't have to worry about it. It doesn't apply to them because it's not universal. I mean, I would have thought it's universal. If someone speaks badly against someone else, why are you allowed to do that? That's not the only thing that in the laws of lashon hara. You're not even allowed to say things that are permissible. Right? That everybody knows. So I remember I once asked my Rebbe this. I said, so if I learn what Noah hides, I should be able to teach him about lashon hara. He said, no. I said, why not? He said, it's not universal. So I thought about it more. I said, take a survey. Take an internet survey. If you speak badly against someone else, that's really bad. If you do it behind their back. Let's say no one else will find out about it. A few people know about it. But you'll never know about it. Hopefully. Yeah, you do it behind someone's back. Who are you hurting? If you'd ask most people who you hurting, nobody. You're not affecting his business. You're not affecting anything. It makes you look better, makes you feel better. But you're not affecting them in any way. According to the Torah, you just killed 3 people. Killed yourself for speaking it, the other person for listening, and the person who you said it against. So if you were to tell your average non-Jew, or your average Jew that doesn't know anything about Torah, and you told them this, they think you're off your cotton picking head. So like, because I spoke against someone else, even if it's true, that's forbidden? Yeah. Oh, the Torah is crazy. That doesn't make any sense. Everybody does it. Right? Everybody does it. Can't live by these laws. That's insane. So the Chofetz Chaim wrote a book about, he didn't say it's forbidden to talk. His whole book is about what you're allowed to talk about. So, to me, it was a little bit of an eye-opener. Yeah, everybody may do it, and people may say things behind people's backs. Happens all the time. But if you would ask the average person, that's normal. It doesn't affect anybody. I'm speaking to a friend of mine. That affects the other person? It doesn't affect them. It's not going to affect their business. It's not going to affect what they do or who they are or anything else. Right? So to me, I would have said that's a universal look. That's a universal. So you might say maybe in a certain way it's universal that people should speak nicely about other people. Or if they don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. Right? That I would think is universal. It's not so simple. Right? It's definitely not so simple, because if you'd ask most people, they think you're crazy. Go tell them, just because it's on the internet doesn't give you, and it's in newspapers and everybody knows it, gives you the right to say, to tell it over to someone for no practical purpose. If there's no constructive purpose, you're not allowed to repeat it. They'll say you're absolutely crazy, you're going to fry in hell forever, because that's crazy. You deserve to fry in hell for that. It doesn't make logical sense. According to Torah, it makes perfect sense. Right? But in the way of the world, they'll say you're absolutely nuts. Yeah, what? Everybody knows about it? I can't speak about it? Why not? They won't even give you the time of day. They say, but everybody does it. Everybody knows it's true. Even so, it's still forbidden. That's a huge novelty. Most people never would have thought of that. Would have come up with that. That comes underneath this category. So, that's not the topic. The idea is, what you're allowed to say and how you say it. How you give it over. Right? There's another thing that we say that, on Yom Kippur, that, a person gives bad advice. And the other person gets messed up by it. So, that's also forbidden. So I'll give one example. Someone asks you for directions. If you're not sure, say, I don't know. If you think you're sure, but you're still not 100% and they may get lost, say you don't know. Or say you're not sure. Why? Reason is because if you give them directions they get lost, you just transgressed over here. Giving bad advice. Wasn't your intention. Right? You didn't have the intention to do that. If you did, then for sure it's forbidden. But if you didn't have the intention, and they get lost, so you'll be beating your chest for that also. So you gotta be careful what you say. And how you say it. I mean, there's a lot more. There's a lot more to, speak about this topic, but I wanted to point out that beyond the shadow of a doubt, I don't think there's any question. I mean, you can argue on this and take what I say with a grain of salt, that's fine. I don't think there's a question. If, again, you can try this. And I think people will be shocked to the core. Before you go to sleep, you're still awake. You're not half asleep. Think about conversations you had during the day. Think about what you said. And if you're a person that curses, right? Not that I wish that upon anyone, but if a person does, think about how many times you cursed during the day. Forget what triggered it. Just how many times you did it. Take stock of it, day by day, and see what happens. If it goes up, it goes down. The bottom line is, if you look at life that way, then 100% your life is going to change, because you take more stock in what you say and how you say things. Doesn't mean you won't make mistakes, potentially, but you have a much higher awareness that most people don't even have, wouldn't have even thought of. I just want to remind people, I also give a Intro to Kabbalah class, and speaking about angels and spiritual forces. It's every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock New York time. I also give conversion classes, Noahide classes. Take a look at my Facebook fan page at Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism. Take a look at my blog, orthodoxconversion.com. Anyone who wants to contact me, feel free to shoot me an email at rabbichaimcoffman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wishing everyone a great Shabbos.